If you are carrying the weight of confusion, exhaustion, or a quiet kind of grief that does not seem to lift no matter how much time passes, I want you to know that what you are feeling makes sense. You did not imagine the tension. You did not overreact to the shifting moods, the sudden withdrawals, or the way conversations would twist until you were apologizing for things you did not do. You were not the problem. What you experienced was a carefully maintained imbalance, one that relied on your empathy, your willingness to adjust, and your quiet hope that if you just understood enough, loved enough, or tried hard enough, the relationship would finally feel stable. It never was. The instability was not a flaw in your character or a failure in your communication. It was the design of a dynamic that required your emotional energy to function. When you finally step away, when you choose silence over negotiation, when you stop answering the calls that only lead to more confusion, something shifts. Not in you, at least not at first. The shift happens in the space you used to occupy, and that space, once emptied, often triggers a response that feels intense, unpredictable, and deeply unsettling. You may watch it unfold from a distance, or you may have lived through it before you found your way to stillness. Either way, the chaos is real. It is also entirely predictable. Understanding why it happens is not about giving it power. It is about removing the mystery from it so you can stop questioning your own reality and finally begin to rebuild yours. The foundation of this dynamic is not love, not even in its distorted form. It is regulation. Some individuals learn early on that they cannot manage their own sense of worth, their own emotional state, or their own internal discomfort without drawing it from someone else. They do not know how to self-soothe. They do not know how to sit with ordinary human friction, with the quiet moments of mismatch, with the natural ebb and flow of two separate lives learning to coexist. Instead, they rely on external validation, constant attention, and a steady flow of emotional reaction to feel grounded. When you are involved with someone who operates this way, your presence becomes a mirror they use to check themselves. Your concern tells them they matter. Your frustration tells them they still have influence. Your attempts to fix things tell them they are still the center of the equation. This is not a conscious strategy they sit down and plan. It is a learned survival pattern, one that feels completely normal to them, because it has worked for years. The problem is that it costs you your equilibrium. You begin to adjust your tone, your schedule, your boundaries, your voice. You start monitoring the atmosphere before you speak. You learn to brace yourself for sudden shifts in warmth. Over time, your nervous system stays on low alert, waiting for the next change, the next test, the next moment when you will be asked to prove your loyalty through your compliance. You carry the emotional labor of keeping the peace, while the peace itself keeps moving. That is not a relationship. That is a performance, and you were cast in the role that makes it possible. When you finally choose no contact, you are not just stepping away from a person. You are stepping away from a system that depended on your participation to function. The chaos that follows is not proof that you made a mistake. It is proof that the system lost its power source. The first thing that often happens is a rapid escalation in communication. Messages multiply. Calls come at odd hours. Emails arrive with subject lines designed to trigger urgency. Sometimes the tone is pleading. Sometimes it is angry. Sometimes it shifts between the two within the same day. This is not genuine remorse or a sudden awakening to your value. This is panic. When the external regulator is removed, the internal discomfort becomes loud. Without your attention, without your reactions, without the familiar rhythm of pursuit and response, they are left with the quiet they have spent years avoiding. The chaos is an attempt to restart the machine. Every message, every unexpected appearance, every carefully timed emotional appeal is a bid to restore the old balance. They are not trying to understand you. They are trying to regain control of the environment. The psychology behind it is straightforward. When a person relies on others to manage their internal state, any loss of access feels like a threat to their sense of self. It is not a rational calculation. It is a reflex. The mind treats the absence of supply like a physical withdrawal. The body tenses. The thoughts race. The behavior becomes frantic because the old coping mechanism has suddenly disappeared, and there is no backup plan in place. You were the backup plan. Your silence forces them to face the very discomfort they built their patterns to avoid. As the initial escalation meets your continued silence, the strategy often shifts.
This is where the chaos takes on a different shape. Instead of direct contact, the energy moves outward. You may hear from mutual friends. You may notice sudden changes in social media activity. You may find out that a narrative is being constructed, one that paints you as cold, unstable, or ungrateful. This is not random gossip. It is a structured effort to regain influence when direct access is blocked. The psychology here is about reputation management and emotional redistribution. When they cannot regulate themselves through your direct response, they attempt to regulate themselves by controlling how you are perceived by others. By shaping the story, they restore a sense of order. They convince themselves that the problem was never the dynamic, but your character. This allows them to avoid the discomfort of looking inward. It also serves a secondary purpose. If they can make others doubt you, they hope you will eventually feel isolated enough to return, just to clear your name, just to prove you are still reasonable, just to re-establish the connection. The trap is subtle. It looks like concern from others. It feels like pressure to respond. But responding does not bring clarity. It brings you back into the system. The chaos here is designed to pull you out of your boundaries and back into the role of defender, explainer, or peacemaker. You do not need to defend your silence. You do not need to prove your sanity to people who are receiving a curated version of events. The truth does not require an audience. It requires your steady commitment to it. Beneath the panic and the narrative control, there is often another phase that feels confusing because it appears to offer exactly what you originally wanted. Suddenly, the tone softens. Promises are made. Reflections sound genuine. You may receive messages that acknowledge your pain, that take responsibility, that suggest real change is finally happening. This is not necessarily a lie in the moment. It is a reaction to the loss of leverage. When the old methods stop working, the mind searches for a new approach. The psychology is rooted in pattern recognition, not personal transformation. They have learned that certain words, certain tones, certain displays of vulnerability have worked in the past to reopen doors. They are using the most effective tool available to restore the connection. The problem is that the tool is being used to manage their discomfort, not to honor your healing. You may feel a surge of hope. You may remember the early days, the moments of warmth, the times when things felt aligned. That hope is natural. It is also a reflection of your capacity for empathy, not a reflection of their readiness for change. Genuine transformation does not arrive in response to lost access. It arrives through sustained, uncomfortable self-reflection, often without an audience. It takes time. It does not demand your return. It does not rush you. It respects your boundaries, even when it is difficult. The chaos of the false reconciliation phase is emotional, not behavioral. It lives in the gap between what you want to believe and what the pattern has already shown you. Stepping through that gap requires honesty, not with them, but with yourself. You know how the cycle ends. You know how the promises dissolve. You know how the attention fades once the connection is secured again. Your clarity does not come from their words. It comes from your willingness to trust your own timeline. Throughout all of these phases, the underlying truth remains unchanged. The chaos is not about you. It is about the disruption of a system that required your participation to survive. Every escalation, every shift in strategy, every attempt to pull you back in is a reflection of internal instability, not external threat. You were never the source of their peace, and you are not the cause of their distress. You were simply the person who stopped feeding a pattern that was slowly consuming you. Recognizing this is not cold. It is accurate. It is the difference between carrying guilt for walking away and understanding that walking away was the first honest thing you did for yourself in a long time. The mind tries to rewrite the past to make the present feel more manageable. You may find yourself replaying conversations, searching for the exact moment things went wrong, wondering if you could have said it differently, if you could have set the boundary sooner, if you could have been more patient. You cannot fix a dynamic that was never designed for mutual growth. Patience in an imbalanced system is not a virtue. It is a delay. The truth is simple. You gave enough. You adjusted enough. You tried enough. The exhaustion you feel is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of prolonged effort in a direction that never led to safety. Letting go of the need to understand their side is not avoidance. It is preservation. You do not need to map their psychology to protect your peace. You only need to recognize that your peace is no longer negotiable.
As the weeks pass and the external noise settles, the real work begins inside you. This is where awareness turns into stability. You start to notice the moments when your body tenses at a familiar notification tone. You notice the old urge to check, to respond, to explain. You notice the quiet guilt that surfaces when you remember a good memory, as if kindness cancels out the cost. These are not setbacks. They are echoes. The nervous system learned to expect certain rhythms, and it takes time to unlearn them. Healing is not about forcing the memories away. It is about meeting them with steady presence. You can acknowledge what felt real while also acknowledging what was unsustainable. You can honor your capacity for care while also honoring your need for consistency. You do not have to choose between the two. You simply have to stop letting one erase the other. The path forward is built on small, consistent choices. It looks like leaving a message on red when your chest tightens. It looks like turning your phone face down when the old anxiety rises. It looks like speaking to yourself with the same patience you once offered to someone who could not offer it back. You are not rebuilding yourself to become someone new. You are returning to the person you were before you learned to shrink. The calm you seek is not found in their absence. It is found in your presence. When you stop waiting for an apology that will not change the pattern, when you stop measuring your worth by their reactions, when you stop treating silence as punishment and start treating it as protection, the ground beneath you steadies. Boundaries are not walls you build to keep people out. They are lines you draw to keep yourself whole. A boundary does not require anger to be valid. It does not require a speech to be enforced. It simply requires you to know what you will no longer tolerate and to act accordingly. Calm detachment is not indifference. It is clarity. It is the ability to see a situation without being pulled into it. It is the quiet understanding that you cannot control another person's choices, but you can absolutely control your response. Self-respect is not a loud declaration. It is a daily practice. It is choosing rest over rumination. It is choosing truth over convenience. It is choosing your own nervous system over someone else's emotional emergency. You do not need to prove your strength to anyone. You only need to stop arguing with your own limits. The chaos that followed your silence will eventually run out of fuel. It always does. What remains is you, standing in the space you reclaimed. Learning how to breathe without bracing, learning how to trust your own judgment again, learning how to live without walking on eggshells. This is not a small thing. It is the foundation of everything that comes next. There will be days when the memory of the confusion feels heavy. There will be moments when the old doubts surface, whispering that you were too rigid, too cold, too unforgiving. These thoughts are not facts. They are leftovers from a system that trained you to prioritize their comfort over your stability. You can let them pass without following them. You can acknowledge the pain without returning to the source. Healing does not ask you to forget. It asks you to stop letting the past dictate your present. You are allowed to close the door without explaining why. You are allowed to prioritize your peace without apologizing for it. You are allowed to move forward without waiting for permission. The person you are becoming does not need to erase the person you were. They simply need to protect the space where growth can finally take root. You have already done the hardest part. You saw the pattern. You named the cost. You chose yourself. That choice does not lose its value because the aftermath was loud. It gains its value because you held it steady anyway. The future does not require you to be fearless. It only requires you to be consistent. Keep your attention on what is real in front of you. Keep your energy directed toward people and practices that return it to you rather than drain it from you. Let your boundaries be quiet but firm. Let your silence be complete rather than conditional. Let your healing be measured in small moments of relief, in the gradual return of your own voice, in the simple act of waking up without the weight of someone else's expectations pressing on your chest. You do not need to chase closure. You are already living it. Closure is not a conversation. It is a decision to stop waiting for a different ending and to start building a different life. The chaos was never yours to manage. The peace is yours to keep. You have earned it through your honesty, through your restraint, through your willingness to step into the unknown rather than stay in a familiar storm. Trust the stillness you are creating. Trust the clarity you are protecting. trust yourself. The road ahead is not about proving you survived. It is about living in a way that honors the fact that you did.